Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. It has been an incredible and busy week for us. Plenty of Lazio things to talk about. We played in Europa League, we played in Serie A, now there is the national break. And Alice McKenzie, if before the starting of the season someone would have told you, hey, at the first international break, Lazio would be fourth, not only fourth, but ahead of Roma, Milan, Juventus, Inter. What would have been your reaction?
Well, I don't think the fact of Lazio being fourth is as crazy as the fact of Lazio being ahead of all those teams you mentioned,
Yeah.
and somehow being fourth and yet still being behind Udinese is certainly not something we expected. I mean, it's been an unbelievable season so far, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of lived up to expectations in some ways. It was thought that this was going to be quite an unpredictable season, very balanced at the top, and it has been that way so far. And yeah, although we've had things to complain about so far in terms of performances and results, and we'll get round to the worst one at some point today, it's still good to be where you want to be. Early part of the season, obviously, but still not bad.
No, definitely not bad. And as you mentioned, Lazio wasted a couple of points, right? Because against Sampdoria away, we could have won that match. Same thing against Torino away. So yesterday against Cremonese, this was not only the first away win of the Serie A, but of the season, of Lazio season. What do you make about this? Why this team struggles so badly away?
Um, I think partly to do probably with the fixture schedule, because if you're playing 3 games a week, you'll get that extra energy and extra push and motivation and so on if it's in front of your home crowd that you won't do otherwise. I think there's always been questions about this team's mentality and how they deal with hardship, how they deal with adversity. And obviously, that's something that has been raised again in the last week with what happened in Denmark. And so, yeah, probably a combination of those things. I mean, I think probably as well it's felt a bit like the team's been getting going this season. I don't think we've really got to a stage where we felt like they're really motoring, playing at their best week in week out, and they found that complete rhythm. Um, and also, the Samp game, it's fine margins. Should have won that game really if it wasn't for a last minute equaliser. The Torino game didn't play well, but a draw, it wasn't a bad result in the end. So, although, yeah, it's first away win of the season, with the exception of Denmark, they've not been disastrous performances every single time.
Yeah.
But Midtjylland really, really was.
I got a message during that match. Is Alasdair in Denmark? So, Alasdair, were you there?
I was not. No, I wasn't even watching the game, so I'm not taking responsibility for that. I mean, I'm quite glad. I usually get quite upset and anxious when I can't watch Lazio, but on Thursday, as soon as I saw the result coming through on my phone, I was pretty relieved with my decision, to be honest.
I didn't see it coming, honestly. And I thought the first 20 minutes, I said, we are playing really well. I'm upset we didn't score because we were dominating. I was a little upset that we were trying to be, too nice instead too pretty. We should have tried to score at least a couple in those first 20 minutes. And then it was like Back to the Future. Lazio allowed win two stupid goals in 2 minutes, and the match was over, pretty much done, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted to get your perspective on what went wrong, really, because I have to say I did raise my eyebrows when I saw the starting lineup with Husay and Radu, particularly as the fullbacks. Um, it did feel like Sarri was perhaps being a bit more willing to rotate his team for this game than in previous games, which did therefore kind of make me wonder if he's if he's taking this as seriously as a challenge as he should do, and of
Mm.
course he'll say he did. Did the players though? Did they really see this coming? I mean, we spoke to Carsten last week, who was telling us that in Denmark they've been having a really poor season. They're off to a bad start under this manager, and so on. So, this isn't just a result that is surprising everyone in terms of Lazio's performance. It seems to have been a result that has surprised a lot of people in Denmark in terms of Midtjylland's performance too. So, but where do you think this went wrong? Was it simply defensive individual errors all over again?
I think that probably Lazio underestimate the team, and they were playing well, and then suddenly in 2 minutes they're down 2-0, and suddenly they realized the match was over, and they weren't able to step up and recover. They didn't even try, I would say. So yeah, I thought those 2 minutes changed the match, and this was something that in the past happened often, right? We were used to see Lazio maybe conceding one goal and then immediately another one. So it's a shame, Alasdair, because last time in the last 13 away games in Europa League, we just won one. So this is a terrible sign. This is a terrible result for a team that is fighting for the first place. If you won last Thursday, I don't want to say it was over, it was done, but you were pretty confident you could finish easily first in the group.
Yeah, well, we got a couple of questions from Karsten, actually. Good questions after this. I mean, one of them was about Mario Kila, who, again, as he had against Feyenoord, was put into the team. And he asked, did he play himself out of further involvement in that match? I mean, how much of the blame would you put at Kila's feet? Can we let him kind of have the benefit of the doubt a bit because of his age, or I mean, how bad was it?
Well, he was a little bit unlucky, I thought, because he felt on the second goal. But against Feyenoord, we talked about it, right? He had a great performance. He played really, really well against a good team. So I don't think his performance will costly, even though because yesterday he came in, right? Lazio has had some problem with Patrick and Casale, so they both got sub, and Gila came in, and so I don't think that will have an impact. But it was a mix of things, right? His eye was out of position, Gila felt, Radu wasn't perfect, so yeah, and I mean, Provedel saved the penalty, and no one ran to the goalkeeper, and they scored immediately afterwards. I mean, that tells you a lot of things, right? Lazio was unlucky; the players weren't focused, and as Sarri said after the match, in Europe you cannot play and hope to win with that mindset. You are going to fail, and that's what happened to Lazio, I think.
Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, we've seen before these stats about how Lazio have played more Europa League games than I think anyone else, really, bar about 2 or 3 teams since it was rebranded the competition. And you do wonder if these kind of Europa League group games, if this group of players are so used to them by now, and their track record in them in the past has been so patchy, as you were mentioning about that long run of bad away form, and do they really have the motivation that they need to be putting in a good performance? I mean, Lazio have previously managed to make it through groups despite not playing all that well. Sometimes they haven't, of course, but sometimes they've got away with it. So I do wonder if there's a bit of complacency just because of the familiarity with this competition and these kind of games, and if they're just not that bothered. We saw in the Champions League campaign, which wasn't that different a team in terms of the kind of key men behind that team. We saw that they can go and put in good performances, in Bruges and in St. Petersburg, and when the motivation and the stakes are higher, I guess they were able to get through a much more challenging Champions League group. But I don't know. Do you think there's anything in that, just the Europa League kind of fatigue of the Europa League for these players? Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, let's not. You mentioned this, but how often did Lazio finish second? Very often, and this is the reason why, right? Losing away games. I mean, you cannot finish the group first if you only win at home and lose away. So, and I do think that probably last Thursday was the easiest away game Lazio had. So that's discouraging. On the other side, it's very positive how the team react because a lot of Lazio fans said, it was the minimum. Well, when you lose that badly, it takes time to recover, and sometimes the match afterwards you don't play at your best because you're still concerned, you're still scared that you can lose again. So it was terrible in Denmark, but was really positive on Sunday against Cremonese. Let's not forget, Lazio had a couple of days, not more, to recover, so that was really promising. So yeah, finally first win away, encouraging sign. First time that Lazio scored 3 goals in the first half with Sarri, I think. So that's another positive sign. And overall, good performance. Pedro, who started against Midtjylland. This is the last question about this match. Were you surprised to see Pedro starting instead of Cancellieri, or do you think with Sarri this is what I was expecting?
I think he knows he's going to use Pedro a lot. So coming back from an injury, it maybe made sense to give Pedro that game time to get back up to speed and so on. And he came off the bench and scored a good goal yesterday. So perhaps that was the idea. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly a bit of concern about how much Immobile has been playing. Now he's off with Italy on Nations League duties, so we'll see how much he features in those games, of course. But I don't think it's sustainable for it to be this much throughout the season. We've had 7 Serie A games, 2 Europa League games now, in the space of maybe a month and a half or so. So yeah, that's something. But look, yeah, moving it on to Cremonese. I mean, that was something that really stood out, was that Lazio needed their leaders, their big players, to step up in this game and to make an example of, leading by example, and how we're going to turn this around and make a statement after that result, because I don't think people would have really accepted another meek performance. I think even people might have still been a bit upset if it was a narrow win, or a win but not a particularly convincing one. So to win 4-0 and to have the chances for that to have been even bigger, we shouldn't underestimate that. It's not a bad Cremonese team either. They've been okay this season. So yeah, I think I was really impressed with the way they stepped up.
Absolutely. And as you were mentioning, Ciro missed 2 huge chances in the second half. I mean, this could easily finish 6-0. So Romagnoli hit the post. Let's not forget about that as well. So we created a lot of chances. And it was good to see the team playing with the right attitude. Not only trying to score, but don't finish. Don't stop after 3-0. Keep going. Keep pushing. So that was really encouraging. But at the same time, Alasdair finished the match with a clean sheet. It's something I like it, but I wasn't used to last season. So again, I mean, let's forget about Midtjylland. Lazio at the moment has conceded 5 goals in Serie A, 5 goals in 7 matches. And on the other side, we scored 13. So it's not that we stopped scoring and now we're all defending. Our defense have improved a lot and we're still scoring a lot of goals. This is really encouraging. Even because, Alasdair, Marcos Antonio still not find a way in a team. We still have to find the right balance, right? Luis Alberto's not playing, etc. In defense, Casale started the last 2 matches in Serie A, but hadn't played a minute before. So it's still a work in progress, but still we allowed 5 goals, which is impressive compared to last year.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly things have changed. It's good now as well that result came, like you said, despite a change to that back four. Sarri was very reluctant to change that much at the start of the season in terms of the back four, his first choice, and with Providel behind them. But now with Lazio injured, obviously he's had to rely on Husai more, and Casali coming into the team, not just coming into the team, but coming in for Romagnoli, who's the defensive leader in that group, really. And yeah, so I thought that was great. I mean, you told me off. You weren't happy about this, but I did say at halftime, if Lazio can come away with a clean sheet now, I'll be a very happy man. And so they did, and they added to the score. Chiro really should have had a hat trick. Let's be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing, really, what's happened in that defense. But it's the game in Denmark is that I don't want to keep coming back to, but it is pretty alarming, really, because I do wonder if, in the grand scheme of things, it might end up being a blessing in disguise, because there's been a lot of improvement in that the way that team is organized defensively. There's been improvement defensively in terms of individual performances in general as well, I would say. But that game, long term, might not be that damaging. You know, Lazio could still get through that group quite comfortably if they manage to address the rest of the games properly. But it's a reminder of how spectacularly things can go bad quite quickly. And this has happened in the past. We don't need to talk about previous blackouts, but this Lazio team will be more than aware of how quickly things can go wrong when they're not on it. So I really hope that this is seen as a warning. You know, that's a game that they can almost pin up on the wall for the rest of the season and say, we cannot take our eyes off the ball for 1 minute here, whether it's against Cremonese or Mons or Empoli or whoever they're playing, these kind of awkward away games that will happen between now and the end of the season.
We didn't talk about Provedel a lot, but I thought he had a big impact on the team. I think not only stop shooting, stop saving, coming out of the box, but even controlling, leading the defense. I thought he had a huge impact. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Maximiliano is not playing even in Europa League. Or do you think? Because Sarri talked about it, right? He said, I'm changing a lot of players. If I change also the goalkeeper, that would be probably one too many substitutions. So that's why Provedel is starting now. But even in Midtjylland, I thought he was the only one who deserved to get credit for his performance, who wasn't awful in Midtjylland. And again, even against Cremonese, he made a couple of very good saves.
Yeah, I feel like he's quickly managed to establish trust with that defense. Since that unexpected debut against Bologna, even. And I remember talking after that game, being impressed during that game that not just the saves he was making, but the calmness he has with the ball at his feet. And that is a huge difference to Thomas Strakosha in previous years. It was always obviously Strakosha's biggest weakness really was that distribution, but also not just the way he actually kicked the ball, but the kind of I guess the way that people would be nervous or unsettled when he had the ball, or perhaps the reluctance to pass it to him because you're not quite sure what he's going to do with it. And with Provedel, I feel like there's more trust there already because he's already shown that he's good with that side of his game too, which is really important. I think that Sarri's acknowledged that, and he's just been called up to the Italy squad for the first time as well, which is great to see. As is Cancellieri, he deserves it. He definitely deserves it. It's been a really unexpectedly great start to the season. I mean, he's probably been Lazio's best signing so far, which isn't what we would have expected necessarily.
Yeah, the thing is, Lazio's fourth, playing a decent football, and still a lot of signing had an impact. Marcos Antonio hardly playing, Casale, Kila, and so on. So that's encouraging. If Sarri gets it right, then you can add other 3 players to the team. So that's really the positive sign of this team. And Chire's back. I mean, we were saying, Ciro's playing a lot of matches. In Serie A, I think he played every second so far. But still, he managed to score a couple of goals, right?
Yeah, and the link up with Sergei there again. Spoke about this before, after the last game. Who were we playing? Verona, was it?
Yep.
Forgetting already what games they were. But yeah, I mean, that first goal was just absolutely vintage Lazio. Sergei assist, and they were so worried about him lining up that shot from distance that he was able to just make that really clever pass, and Immobile's finishing was excellent. Penalty, what do you reckon? I mean, I found that a really strange one. To begin with, I thought that is not a penalty because it hits his chest and then hits his arm. But the commentary team actually did a really good job of explaining that because he's gone in this bizarre position with his arms above his head, it counts as an unnatural position that he's then chopping his arms down to knock the ball out for a corner. So a bit of an odd one, but we'll take it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was surprised, but he was not well positioned with his hands. So he was generating more space with the hands, and that's why I guess they gave Lazio the penalty. The funny thing, Alasdair, is now that there is a centralized VR room, so and this would help to have the same results in every match, right? But so I guess they analyze the movement of the defender, and that's why they gave the penalty. Honestly, I thought they would never give it to us, but for once, I'm happy about the ref decision.
Got quite a good question from Per Nielsen today, asking, is Sarri afraid of Immobile? Because why was he playing 90 minutes yesterday? He says, is Romero and Cancellieri that bad that Sarri won't even risk playing them when 3-0 up? He's got a point. I mean, I can understand why Immobile was starting in that game again, obviously, but there's been a few examples now this season of Sarri waiting a very long time in matches, even when they've looked quite comfortable, to give Immobile any rest.
Well, I think the issue there was the injuries, because both Patrick and Casale asked for a substitution, and you cannot make infinite solution changes. You have 5 and 3 slots. So Lazio, like on Thursday and like against Verona, wasted the slot because of injuries. So same thing about Zaccagni. Let's not forget, Zaccagni came out because he wasn't 100% fit. So I think that's the only issue there.
The other thing worth mentioning that's not touched on yet is that it's the second win in a row directly after a European game.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear something slightly crazy, Lazio have now already got more points in their post-Europa League games than they did in all of last season. Lazio got 5 points in Serie A from 8 matches directly after European games last season, and now they've already got 6. So that's good. I think that side of things has been overshadowed this week, obviously, because the context is very different, but still the reality is the same, that they've had a midweek game and they've responded with getting a win in Serie A. So that's really positive.
Again, I think the fact that Sarri rotate a lot of players helped the performance, right? I thought that changing a lot of players this Sunday helped Lazio having a good performance against Cremonese, while last year he didn't rotate that much, right? So I think this have an impact, and we saw it. Not only, obviously, Lazio wanted to forget the bad performance in Europa League, but I thought rotating a little bit more the players, Milinkovic playing on Sunday, Luis Alberto on Thursday, did help the team. And on the other side, Alasdair, we have to say that his eye is playing well. I mean, one of the biggest concern we had was Isai starting, and we didn't lose on Thursday because of Isai. And in so far this season, Isai is playing well. Nothing amazing, but he's giving everything he's got, and the performance are good enough to allow Lazio to win and fight for the fourth position in Serie A, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably helps that he's playing on the right-hand side. I know he spent a lot of time on the left at Napoli as well, but he is right-footed. And as bizarre as it might sound from watching Lazio, it's quite useful having, right-footed right-backs, left-footed left-backs. Yeah, no, he's done okay so far. We had a comment from David about Casale as well. Very impressed with Casale. Thinks we should be talking about him more. Yeah, it's good. It's been good to see him coming into the team and making an impact. I wouldn't say I've been totally blown away by anything he's done so far, but it's in itself pretty encouraging that he's come into the team and put in strong performances and not put a foot wrong and look pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising if you think that he didn't play a second before last Sunday, and then suddenly he starts to match. And I thought against Verona last week he was great, perfect. Even against Cremonese he was good. Now I'm a little bit concerned about this little injury he had because he was picking up. And going back to the national team, I was expecting Casale to be called earlier than Cancellieri. That was a huge surprise for me, right? But yeah, I mean, as we said last week, we have 4 central defenders who could all 4 start. This is amazing if we think about the past of Lazio and central defenders of Lazio, right?
Yeah, it's definitely the part of the team we're seeing the most confident rotation in right now. Something we've already spoken about is how kind of conservative Sarri's been with that rotation in general, but he seems to have done it more and more, and he's trusting that more and more. And yeah, Casale, Gila, Patrick, Romagnoli have all been interchanging and all look up to the task, so that's good. I would like to still see more of Marcos Antonio because I don't feel like he's played badly when he's been given a chance, but and also I'd not been, Cataldi's had his moments, but I don't think he's like long term really the solution in that midfield.
And I thought Thursday Cataldi was awful, so I was expecting Marcos Antonio to start. So that's a little bit surprising. Talking about what you were mentioning about the rotation, etc. Are you surprised that Luca Romero has played so little? I think we have a question about Jan Putra ask about the contract extension of Luca Romero. Alasdair, there is a belief, a lot of Lazio fans think that Luca Romero is not playing because Lazio want to extend his contract. Some believe that they're waiting Romero to turn 18 so that they can do a long-term contract. Other believes that if Romero doesn't accept the Lazio offer, he won't play like it's happening now. What's your take on this? What's your position?
Well, yeah, so the second part of that comment was that Lazio kind of used to have contract extension sagas pretty much every season, which is, not a bad point. I don't know. I mean, I think I can see why there are various kind of theories flying around, but look, if you take a step back and look at this from a kind of squad rotation perspective that we're just talking about with the defense, Sarri's only just started really having any confidence in rotating that defense. And then in attack, Romero's position in that rotation was always going to be behind Pedro, behind Cancellieri anyway. And Pedro and Cancellieri themselves haven't had an awful lot of game time so far this season because Sarri has been reluctant to really change that attack for whatever reason. Immobile, Anderson, Zaccagni have been starting more or less every game. And when you're looking at options coming off the bench, Romero just that's his place in the pecking order. So I don't think there's necessarily anything hugely strange at play here because it's not going against any pattern that was set last year. It's not like Romero was always coming off the bench every single match last year. That wasn't happening. Let's remember he's what, 17. He's so young. I know he's been around for a bit now, but he's still very, very young, very raw, and there's nothing wrong with having patience in bringing him into the team, in my view. So I think when you take a step back and look at it that way, it's not a huge surprise, really.
Especially because every time Cancellieri comes in, he plays really well. So
Yeah.
why changing the order? I mean, Cancellieri was probably the biggest surprise. A, I didn't expect Sarri to give him a chance as a winger. And B, every time he comes in, he's really impressive. Yeah, talking about Pedro, he has been already injured a couple of times so far, and we are only at half September. This is a concern, even though Alasdair, I mean, he's 34. It's not a huge surprise, right? He's getting injured often. I think we'll have to live with that.
Although if he played for Juventus, Allegri would say it was a huge surprise that his old winger was injured. So, yeah, of course. I mean, look, I think Pedro is kind of like this luxury option we have really now. I don't think he's going to be starting week in, week out. I don't think he's going to be playing 90 minutes all that often. But he's still just got so much class, so much quality. I mean, he's been an unbelievable signing, really, if you consider kind of what his form was like at Roma, the fact that he came for basically nothing. So yeah, I mean, I think that's potentially a route into the team for Romero as the season goes on. You know, if Pedro is struggling more for fitness, I think the other thing as well is that Cancellieri, you mentioned, he's been playing on the right wing and he's been doing well there, and I think that's the other problem for Romero. That's really where he was wanting to be getting game time, but Cancellieri hasn't been getting used as a vice immobile that much, which is kind of what we thought he would be at the start of the season. And so therefore he's ended up being third choice rather than second.
Talking about choices and performance, did you expect Vecino to play that much? I mean, I thought at the beginning he was below Basic, but I think he's now one of the starters there in midfield, right?
I think so, yeah. I think so. He's been really, really unexpectedly impressive. And I think Sarri really likes him. That seems to be clear. And he's done a bit of everything so far. He's scored goals. He's been involved in the build-up. He's added a bit of physicality to that midfield. He's also played in different roles. He's played as a Medsala, but he's also dropped in as being that regista as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that he's offering a hell of a lot to this team in a way perhaps that was more than we expected. So I think Basic is definitely below him now. I mean, it's almost a head-to-head between Vecino and Alberto at this point for who starts.
Yeah, you know, Vecino has experience. Sarri wanted him, and obviously Vecino wants to prove Inzaghi wrong, right? Inzaghi didn't use him at all last year, and he wants to prove that he's still a player and he's still a quality player. And honestly, he's giving that balance that with Luis Alberto Lazio didn't have so far. Even though every time Luis Alberto come in the second half, he's decisive. Like yesterday, he didn't make the assist, but the fourth goal comes from a nice idea of Luis Alberto again. Great performance. I like his position, but I really don't know how long he will accept it, right? Starting from the bench every time.
Well, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that develops. I think there's probably enough games in the season that he's still going to end up getting a lot of game time and a lot of opportunities, but whether they're in the kind of big matches or not, or whether they're in the matches he wants to be playing in, I guess, is another question. But it's a good choice to have. You know, it's good to be able to pick on different options rather than over relying on the same midfield, which we have been for years and years now. Before finishing, though, I wanted to ask you just about Inzaghi's situation at Inter, because I think it's quite an interesting one for Lazio fans to be following this, because We've seen a lot of frustration from Inter fans and a lot of frustration with Inzaghi's tactics, his substitution, stuff we're familiar with. I mean, we saw on Sunday it was, that he took off 2 players after half an hour because they were on yellow cards, which I think is even more than we've seen from his time at Lazio before. So, what do you think? Is he in trouble, Inzaghi?
I mean, rule number 2 of the Simone Inzaghi guidebook: if a defender or a defensive midfield get booked, he's going to be subbed. Rule number 2, guys. I mean, it's not a surprise, right? You knew
What's
it.
rule number 1?
You only play 3-5-2.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
there's even the comma. Even if you don't have the right players, you still play 3-5-2.
And rule number 3 is get Bastos in.
Rule number 3 is you don't play players under 22 years old. Only if I train them in the academy, they can start. Otherwise, they don't start.
That was probably what happened with Bastoni this week, because Bastoni was one of the ones he took off after 30 minutes, and he probably just had someone whisper in his ear on the bench, you know, Bastoni is only 22, and it's like, oh my god, get the board up to get him off. Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, I think that he's in a difficult position there now.
Yeah.
It's the expectations are so different, and it's just been interesting seeing the same kind of doubts and debates happening, but on a bigger scale, I guess, because we're talking about Inter, we're talking about the so-called Scudetto favourites this year, and him trying to find a way out of that. And yeah, just wanted to get your perspective on it. But you think he'll survive?
Well, it depends. It depends. I don't think he's in danger now, because the other thing is, they promised him a completely different transfer market. You remember at a certain point, it looks like Inter was signing Lukaku and Dybala. And at the end, only Lukaku came. Now Lukaku is injured. You know, they are struggling a little bit. Skriniar should have left. They should have signed Bremer. And instead, Skriniar's still there. So, I don't know. I mean, it's not only due to Simone Inzaghi. So I think he's still a good manager. Obviously, you have to accept positive side and negative side of a manager.
Yeah. And that seems to be what the Curva Nord have said today. I saw they brought out a statement basically saying it's not just on him, it's on the players, and of course it is. So I think if he still has their backing for now, at least fans, then he'll probably be okay. I think the thing we're going to see a lot of now is Chelsea have kind of ruined this for a lot of managers, where by sacking Thomas Tuchel, there's this kind of luxury coach who's not got a job, who's just hanging around. So I think a lot of coaches under pressure in big jobs now, no matter what country you're in, are probably going to have their eye over their shoulder a little bit, knowing that there's Tuchel's waiting for his next job out there somewhere.
Well, there's even Mazzari available, so they're two great coaches. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know why you're laughing. Okay.
I can laugh now because he's not being linked with Lazio anymore. I wasn't laughing last summer.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that rumor, honestly. But, you know, anything can happen. I think we can wrap it up here, Alasdair. It's a good international... Last question. Do you think it's the right time for the international break?
Well, it seems kind of pointless again, but I guess there's a World Cup coming up. Not that you'd know about it, Vittorio. It's where like all the best teams in the world get together and play a competition. But yeah, I think that, you know, there's Nations League games going on. There's friendlies going on because teams are preparing for Qatar and so on. So you can see why it's happening. But it is frustrating for many reasons. You know, it's like interrupting what's been a very good season, and you don't really want that momentum to go now. It's also adding a lot more games into the legs of players who are already playing 3 times a week. So yeah, and I think especially if you support countries like Italy or Scotland, it feels a bit kind of meaningless at the moment. So yeah, looking forward to it coming back again already.
Yeah, especially, I mean, a lot of people are complaining about Ciro Immobile. I would have been so happy if he wasn't called for the national team. But again, number proves that Ciro Immobile is the best Italian striker ever. I mean, in the last 5 years or so. So, yeah, I'm not happy about that, honestly. But yeah, unfortunately, he has been called, and let's hope he doesn't get any injury and he comes back in great condition. Because again, after the break, there's Lazio Spezia, who looks an easy match, but it's a very important match for Lazio. We should try to win that match because there's Milan Juventus. There's I think another good match, right? Well, doesn't don't remember. So
Inter Roma.
no, there's Inter Roma, Napoli, Torino. I was looking already the other one. Atalanta, Fiorentina. So, if you win that match, anyway, some of the big teams will drop points because they're playing against each other. So it would be fundamental for Lazio to get 3 points out of that.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's 8 Lazio players away on international duty.
Yeah.
So it's not that bad. I think there are definitely other squads who are worse affected by international football than Lazio are. But yeah, let's just keep everything crossed that nothing goes wrong in the next 10 days or so.
Yep. Thanks everybody for listening as usual. Remember that you can follow us on Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube, iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcast. We are there. And I just say this, it has been an incredible, bizarre weekend. In fact, Alasdair is now top of the league in my fantasy football.
Easy. Thank you, Ciro. Thank you, Sergey.
It won't last long, don't worry.
Yeah, enjoy it while it's there. I'm glad it's you who said that, not me.
Yeah, you have 2 weeks to celebrate, and then it's over. Anyway, thanks again, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.